What happens when a god who has survived the death of his universe opens his eyes aboard a starship that was never meant to carry myth, magic, or destiny? And why does every sensor aboard scream that reality itself has been breached? Space is silent, but the moment before the storm never is. A Federation science vessel drifts at the edge of an uncharted nebula, its hull kissed by violet radiation and starlight warped into impossible spirals. On the bridge, alarms rise in panicked harmony, not for weapons fire, not for an incoming fleet, but for something far worse. The laws of physics are bending. Power levels spike without a source. Gravity fluctuates as if the universe itself has taken a sudden, anxious breath. Then it happens. A thunderclap explodes inside the ship. Not outside, inside. Light fractures across the corridor in branching arcs of blue-white energy, and the air itself tears open as if ripped by an unseen hand. Crew members are thrown from their feet. Consoles overload. And from the heart of that storm, a massive figure crashes onto the deck, armor scorched, cape torn, knuckles clenched, as if still gripping a hammer that is no longer there. Thor Odinson, god of thunder, son of Odin, awakens among the stars. His breath is ragged, his head rings with echoes of fire and screams, and a dying world. Asgard is gone. Ragnarok has passed. He remembers the final stand, the collapse of realms, the unbearable weight of Falurand, then nothing. No Bifrost, no stars he recognizes, no familiar hum of cosmic magic, only cold metal beneath his palms. Thor rises slowly, muscles coiling with instinctive readiness. His eyes flicker with lightning as he senses the space around him orderly, precise, painfully mortal. This is no realm of gods. This is something else, something fragile. Footsteps approach. Red-shirted security officers round the corner, phasers raised, hands shaking as they take in the towering figure clad in alien armor, eyes glowing like a storm barely contained. Unknown entity, one of them says, voice cracking despite training. Stand down, identify yourself. Thor looks at them, truly looks. He sees no malice, no hunger for conquest, only fear, and courage layered atop it. I am Thor, he says, his voice carrying the low rumble of distant thunder. And I believe I am very far from home. On the bridge, Captain Jean-Luc Picard watches the live feed in stunned silence. This is not first contact. This is something older, something that predates warp drive, predates the Federation, predates reason itself. Sensors cannot classify the energy emanating from the being now standing in their corridors. It is not technological. It is not biological. It is myth, given form. Shields to maximum, Picard orders softly. And, someone get Commander data. I want every possible analysis. Thor, meanwhile, feels it before they do. A pull, a pressure deep in his bones, as if the cosmos itself has recognized him and rejected him. This universe does not want gods. Its balance is delicate, rational, engineered through centuries of logic and restraint. And yet, somewhere far beyond the hull of this ship, something ancient stirs. Because Thor has arrived. And with him, echoes of Ragnarok. As he is escorted carefully, respectfully to the bridge, Thor's thoughts churn. He senses no infinity stones, no familiar constellations, no world tree binding realms together. The 9 realms are absent, replaced by endless quadrants, neutral zones, empires built not on prophecy, but on politics. And yet, power answers him here. When a nearby console sparks, Thor lifts his hand without thinking. Lightning snaps from his fingers, stabilizing the surge before it can cascade. The ship hums, systems realigning as if grateful. Data watches, eyes wide with something dangerously close to awe. Captain, he says, the probability that this being operates under known physical laws is approaching 0. Picard meets Thor's gaze across the bridge. 2 leaders, 2 philosophies, one forged by gods and war, the other by diplomacy and hope. Mr. Thor, Picard says, measured and calm. Welcome aboard the USS Enterprise. You appear to have crossed not only space, but realities. Thor straightens, pride and sorrow warring within him. Then tell me, captain of this vessel, he replies, thunder whispering beneath each word, what dangers plague your stars? Before Picard can answer, the ship shudders violently. Sensors flare. From deep within the nebula, a vast geometric shadow emerges cold, immense, and utterly devoid of fear. Data's voice drops to a whisper. Captain, it's the Borg. Thor turns toward the viewscreen, lightning crawling across his armor as something dark and inevitable clicks into place. He does not know these beings, but he knows conquest, he knows extinction. And somewhere in the void, the Borg have already begun adapting to a god. What happens when a civilization built on pure logic encounters a force that cannot be quantified, and why do the Borg suddenly hesitate for the first time in their existence? The Borg cube advances through the nebula like a moving eclipse, its surface crawling with green-lit conduits, its sheer mass bending sensor readings into nonsense. On the Enterprise bridge, silence tightens every breath. This is an enemy Starfleet understands all too well, relentless, adaptive, inevitable. Yet now, standing before the viewscreen, Thor feels something unfamiliar ripple through the air. Curiosity, not his own. The Borg are watching him. Thor steps closer, ignoring the murmurs behind him. He senses no soul within that monstrous vessel. No singular will only, a collective hunger, cold and methodical. It reminds him of armies he has faced before, but stripped of passion, stripped of rage. This is conquest without glory. They peer at me as scholars might a blade, Thor mutters, seeking its balance, its edge. Picard glances at him. They will attempt to assimilate you. Thor's jaw tightens. They may try. The cube fires. A beam of emerald energy lances toward the Enterprise, slamming into the shields with devastating force. Consoles explode. The ship reels. Red alerts scream as hull integrity drops faster than calculations predicted. Captain, data reports. Their weapons are modulating. They are adjusting in real time. Thor doesn't wait for orders. He strides forward, planting his feet before the viewscreen, raising his hand to the stars beyond, as if they were a storm-torn battlefield. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then space itself seems to inhale. Lightning erupts not from the ship's systems, but from Thor. Bolts tear through vacuum, ignoring distance, smashing into the Borg cube with thunderous impact. Entire sections of the cube go dark, its perfect geometry scarred by divine fury. The collective reacts instantly, rerouting power, reinforcing shields, adapting frequencies. But Thor feels it. They are confused. The Borg have adapted to energy weapons, kinetic force, even temporal anomalies. But this is neither technology nor physics. This is will made manifest, lightning shaped by emotion, power born of loss and defiance. Captain, Data says slowly, the Borg are unable to classify the energy source. Adaptation efficiency has dropped by 47%. For the first time in Starfleet history, the Borg hesitate. Thor lowers his arm, breathing hard. They learn quickly, he says, but not quickly enough. Picard studies him, 1,000 questions burning behind his calm exterior. Mr. Thor, if you possess this level of power, why does your presence feel unstable? Our sensors indicate reality distortion around you. Thor's gaze darkens. He feels it to the pressure, the wrongness. Every strike he unleashes sends ripples through this universe, like cracks spreading through ice. This cosmos was not forged to carry gods, and worse, something is answering those ripples. A voice, distant and cold, brushes the edge of Thor's mind. Not the Borg, something older. Captain Worf growls from tactical. New readings, subspace fractures forming near the cube. The Borg vessel begins to retreat, pulling back into the nebula, but not in defeat. In calculation, they have seen enough for now. As the cube vanishes, the fractures widen. Stars stretch into lines. Space folds inward on itself. A tear opens not, unlike the Bifrost, but darker, unstable, screaming with cosmic strain. Thor staggers. Memories crash into him. Flames, prophecy, the end of all things. No, he whispers. Not here. Picard turns sharply. What is it? Thor looks at him, eyes blazing with a fear he has not allowed himself to feel since Ragnarok. In my universe, he says, voice heavy with dread, the death of gods called forth something that devours worlds, a shadow born of endings. The tear pulses. From within it, something vast shifts, unseen yet unmistakable. And it has followed me. The Enterprise shakes, as if caught in the grip of an approaching god or monster. What if the end of one universe didn't die with Itant? What if Thor's greatest enemy was never meant to exist in a reality built on reason instead of prophecy? The tear in space does not roar or explode. It whispers. That is what terrifies Thor most. On the bridge of the Enterprise, officers brace themselves as gravity fluctuates, stars bending like reflections on shattered glass. The fracture hovering ahead is wrong in a way no sensor can articulate. It is not a wormhole, not subspace, not anything Starfleet has a name for. It looks like the universe has forgotten how to hold itself together. Thor drops to one knee. Pain lances through his skull as memories long buried claw their way back to the surface. He sees Asgard burning again, hears Heimdall's final cry, feels the weight of destiny pressing down until even gods break beneath it. Ragnarok was not just destruction, it was a signal, a summoning. Picard steps toward him despite the danger. "Mr. Thor, talk to us." Thor clenches his fists. Lightning flickers weakly around his armor, unstable, restrained by effort alone. "There are beings," he says slowly, "that exists only to witness the end. Not conquerors, not tyrants. They are conclusions." The fracture pulses again. Data's fingers fly across his console. "Captain, whatever this anomaly is, it is feeding on residual energy from Mr. Thor's presence. The more powerful the source, the more coherent it becomes. So it's stabilizing," Riker says. "By feeding." "Yes." Thor looks up sharply. "Then I am its anchor." A low-frequency vibration rolls through the ship. Not an impact more like the distant toll of a bell. From within the tear, a shape begins to form. Not fully visible, not yet physical, but vast enough that even its outline makes the stars around it dim. Worf's voice hardens. "That thing does not come in peace." "No," Thor replies. "It comes because it must." The bridge lights flicker as the Enterprise struggles to maintain position. Engineering reports overloads across multiple systems, as if the ship is fighting a tide that cannot be seen. And beneath it all, a sensation spreads, an instinctive dread that has nothing to do with survival, and everything to do with inevitability. Picard straightens. Options. Data hesitates. Conventional weapons are ineffective. This entity does not appear to fully exist within our space tower. However, if Mr. Thor is correct, then its manifestation depends on mythic causality, narrative fulfillment. Riker blinks. Narrative. What? Thor lets out a humorless breath. "In my realm, some battles are written before swords are ever drawn." The shape within the tear sharpens, edges becoming clearer. A massive silhouette, crowned with jagged contours like broken horns or shattered halos. Eyes ignite within the darkness, cold, ancient, and utterly disinterested in the lives beneath them. A voice enters the minds of everyone on the bridge at once. Not loud, certain. "The end follows the god." Several officers stagger. One collapses to her knees, tears streaming without understanding why. Even Data stiffens, processors spiking, as something bypasses logic and presses directly against awareness. Thor forces himself to stand. "I did not run," he says aloud, though he does not know if he is speaking to the being, the crew, or himself. "I survived." The eyes turn toward him. Survival delays the inevitable. The fracture widens. Outside the ship, smaller rifts begin appearing, hairline cracks, spreading outward like veins through reality. Long-range sensors scream as distant stars blink out, not destroyed, but erased, as if they were never there at all. Picard makes a decision. "Helm, take us out of here." Maximum warp. The Enterprise surges forward. For a moment, it seems to work. Then space resists. Warp engines howl in protest as the ship strains against an invisible grip. The entity does not pursue. It does not need to. Its presence alone bends the universe, making escape feel like trying to outrun the concept of nightfall. Thor closes his eyes. He feels something deep within himself, respondent, lightning, not rage, but the weight of every choice that led him here, every loss, every failure. Ragnarok did not end with the death of Asgard. It ended with him still breathing. Captain Thor says quietly, "This universe does not believe in gods. That may be its salvation." Picard meets his gaze. "And what's yours?" Thor opens his eyes, and for the first time since arriving, the lightning around him steadies, not wild, not explosive, but focused, controlled. "I will not be the ending again." The entity stirs, as if amused. The end does not ask permission. The Enterprise lurches violently as the fracture begins to collapse, inward pulling everything toward it, including Thor. What if the only way to save a universe that rejects gods is for one god to let go of everything that ever made him divine? End. What happens when Thor steps willingly into the pool of oblivion? Thor does not resist when the fracture claims him. That is what shocks everyone. Energy claws at his armor, peeling lightning from his veins, dragging him toward the collapsing wound in space, like a judgment already passed. Security officers shout. Worf moves instinctively toward him, only to be held back by Picard's raised hand. The captain understands something crucial in that moment. This is not a rescue scenario. This is a choice. Thor turns once, looking back at the bridge, at the humans who face the unknown with fragile bodies and stubborn hope, at a universe that survives not because of prophecy, but because people decide it should. Hold the line, Thor says softly. Whatever happens next, do not follow. Then he steps forward. The fracture engulfs him. Lightning detonates outward as Thor vanishes into the tier, and the sudden absence of his presence sends shockwaves through the Enterprise. Consoles stabilize. Gravity evens out. For a terrifying heartbeat, it seems as though the anomaly has been satisfied. Then the screaming starts. Not from the ship, from inside the fracture. Thor falls through layers of reality that have no names. Memories tear loose from him, ripped away by forces older than thought. He sees Asgard not as it was, but as it might have been, unburned, untouched, a future that never arrived. He feels Mjolnir's weight again, and then feels it slip from his grasp. Not physically, but conceptually. Power bleeds from him. The entity watches from everywhere at once, its presence pressing down like gravity made conscious. You are an echo, it tells him. A remainder. This universe has no place for you. Thor screams not in pain, but in defiance and drives his fists into the void. Lightning answers, weaker now, strained, but still his, still earned. I am not a story's mistake, he roars. I am its survivor. The entity recoils not from force, but from contradiction. On the Enterprise, Data stares at his readings in disbelief. Captain, the anomaly is destabilizing. Mr. Thor's energy signature is changing. It is becoming less anomalous, more compatible. Riker turns sharply. You're saying he's becoming part of this universe? Yes, by relinquishing mythic constants. Picard's jaw tightens. He's sacrificing what makes him a god. Inside the fracture, Thor feels it happening. The thunder fades to a distant rumble. His armor fractures, reforming into something simpler, less symbolic. Power no longer flows through him by birthright or destiny, but by choice, by discipline, by belief. The entity lashes out, tendrils of void, slicing through the space around him. Thor is thrown back, battered, bleeding in a way gods are not meant to bleed. But when he rises, something fundamental has changed. The void does not bend around him anymore. It resists him. For the first time, the entity speaks with uncertainty. You weaken yourself. Thor wipes blood from his mouth and smiles, small, fierce, utterly human. No, he says, I define myself. He drives forward, not with thunder, but with will alone. Each step collapses portions of the fracture, sealing cracks as fast as the entity can tear them open. The universe responds not as a stage 4 myth, but as a system recognizing stability. The entity begins to unravel. On the Enterprise, the fracture shrinks violently. Stars snap back into place. The ship lurches free as warp fields stabilize. Crew members watch in awe and terror as the impossible slowly becomes manageable. Then the fracture collapses entirely. Silence, no explosion, no victory fanfare, just absence. Moments later, a figure slams onto the Enterprise's hull, sliding along the deflector shield, before being pulled into a tractor beam. Medical teams rush as Thor is brought aboard unconscious, armor dim, lightning gone. Picard stands over him in sickbay, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. He's alive, Crusher says, but he's changed. Thor stirs, his eyes open, no longer glowing, no thunder behind them, just exhaustion, and something like peace. Captain, he murmurs, is your universe still standing? Picard allows himself a rare, quiet smile. Yes, thanks to you. Thor exhales, relief washing over him. But deep in the darkness beyond known space, something else has noticed the disruption. Something that does not fear gods or their absence. The Borg are adapting again. What if losing his godhood doesn't make Thor weaker, but makes him something the Borg can finally understand? Fear and hunt. Thor wakes to silence. Not the vast, echoing silence of space, but the intimate kind soft lights, steady breathing, the muted hum of a ship at rest. He blinks slowly, eyes adjusting, and for a disorienting moment he expects to feel thunder coiled beneath his skin. It isn't there. No lightning waiting to answer his pulse. No cosmic resonance tying him to realms beyond sight. Gravity feels heavier than he remembers. His limbs ache, not with the noble pain of battle, but with the dull protest of a body that has been pushed past its limits. When he tries to sit up, his muscles tremble. So this is what it is to be truly here, he thinks. Not above, not apart. Dr. Crusher gently presses him back down. Easy. You've been through something no one on this ship can fully explain. Thor studies his hands. They look the same, scarred, strong, but they feel quieter. He senses the universe now the way mortals do, indirectly, imperfectly, through instruments and intuition instead of certainty. What I was, he says slowly, could not exist here without breaking this reality. Picard stands nearby, hands clasped behind his back. And what are you now? Thor considers the question. It frightens him more than the void ever did. Still, Thor, he answers at last, just unarmed by fate. Before Picard can respond, the ship shudders. Red alert. Data's voice cuts through the calm. Captain, Borg vessel emerging from transwarp. They are hailing us. On the bridge, tension snaps back into place like a drawn bowstring. The Borg cube looms on the view screen once more, closer than before. Its surface altered, reconfigured with new lattice patterns, new energy nodes. They learned. Worf growls. Yes, Data agrees, and they are no longer focused on divine energy signatures. They are focused on Mr. Thor himself. The cube hails again. Picard allows it. The familiar, chilling voice fills the bridge. Thor Odinson, your previous state was incompatible with assimilation. Your current state is optimal. Thor steps forward despite his weakness. You mistake me, he says evenly. I am not yours to catalogue. You are now finite, the Borg reply. Finite things can be improved. Picard cuts in. You will disengage and leave Federation space. We will not, the Borg say. This individual represents a unique convergence of mythic origin and rational adaptation. He bridges to incompatible frameworks. His assimilation will accelerate perfection. Thor feels a cold understanding settle in. As a god, he was an anomaly the Borg could not solve. As something closer to mortal anchored to this universe's rules, he has become a problem they can, and problems are meant to be solved. The cube fires, the Enterprise dodges, shields flaring as weapons tear across space. This time, the Borg do not simply adapt, they anticipate. Their beams track ahead of the ship's movements, forcing evasive maneuvers that strain the hull. They're predicting us, Riker snaps. No, Data says, eyes narrowing. They are predicting him. Thor grips the railing as the ship rocks. A strange calm settles over him. He cannot outfight the Borg the way he once could. No storms to hurl, no godly wrath to terrify them into retreat. But he understands something now. This universe values cooperation over dominance, ingenuity over destiny. Captain, Thor says quietly, they seek to take me because they believe I am the bridge between myth and logic. Picard meets his gaze. Are they wrong? Thor thinks of the fracture ceiling because he chose restraint, of power reshaped by responsibility, of a universe that survived because it did not bend to prophecy. No, Thor says. But they misunderstand the lesson. He turns to Data. You adapt through analysis. Through iteration, yes. Thor smiles faintly. So do I. Outside, the Borg cube begins deploying smaller vessels, cutting off escape vectors with surgical precision. The Enterprise is being boxed in, not destroyed, but cornered. The Borg are not here to win a battle. They are here to collect Thor. And for the first time since Ragnarok, Thor realizes that survival may require something far more dangerous than thunder. Trust. What if the only way to defeat an enemy that consumes everything is to offer them something they've never been able to assimilate? And what happens when Thor chooses to walk into the jaws of the Borg by his own will? The Enterprise shudders again as another Borg cutting beam slices across the shields, peeling layers away with ruthless efficiency. Sparks rain from the ceiling. The crew moves with practiced urgency. But beneath it all is the creeping awareness that this battle is unfolding on a level Starfleet doctrine never anticipated. Picard grips the arm of his chair. They're hurting us. Yes, Data confirms. All tactical vectors indicate containment rather than destruction. Their objective remains unchanged. Thor stands at the center of the bridge, steady despite the chaos. His presence oddly grounding, now not overwhelming, not divine, but resolute. He watches the Borg cube on the view screen, feeling their attention like cold fingers probing his thoughts. They want me, he says, and they believe taking me will complete them. Riker snaps his head toward him. Don't even think about it. Thor turns, meeting each officer's eyes in turn. These are not warriors of prophecy. They are explorers, scientists, protectors. They stand not because fate demands it, but because they choose to. That is precisely why this may work. Thor replies. Picard understands before the words are fully spoken. You're proposing to surrender, to confront. Thor corrects. On my terms. Data steps closer. curiosity sharpening his tone. The Borg assimilate by stripping individuality. Your previous resistance stemmed from your mythic nature. However, your current state suggests partial compatibility. Thor nods. They believe that makes me vulnerable. And does it? Picard asks quietly. Thor exhales. Yes, but also dangerous to them. Before objections can arise, Thor continues. The Borg cannot process contradiction. They adapt to patterns, not paradoxes. Gods were too absolute for them. Mortals are too predictable. But I am now something in between. He places a hand over his chest. I chose who I am. The cube looms closer, dwarfing the Enterprise until stars disappear behind its bulk. A tractor beam locks on, gentle but inescapable. Picard's voice is firm, controlled. If we do this, there will be contingencies. You will not face them alone. Thor smiles genuine, grateful. I know. Transporter beams engulf him. The world dissolves. Thor materializes inside the Borg cube, the air heavy with the hum of machinery and the whisper of countless voices layered into one. Drones turn toward him in perfect unison, their implants adjusting, scanning, recalibrating. You have chosen compliance, the collective infiniteness. I have chosen conversation, Thor replies. They move quickly. Nanoprobes inject into his bloodstream, cold and invasive. Thor grits his teeth as they spread, mapping his biology, rewriting systems. Pain flares, but he does not resist. Instead, he opens himself. Not his power, his memory. The Borg stagger. Images flood their network not as data, but as experience. Loss without calculation. Love without utility. Failure endured, not optimized away. The moment Thor stepped into the fracture knowing it would cost him everything. The choice to let go of godhood, not to win but to preserve others. Drones freeze mid-motion. Assimilation efficiency plummets. This information is irrelevant. The collective insists, its voice faltering with static. Thor steps forward, as if walking through a storm. No, he says softly. It is everything. The nanoprobes struggle, unable to categorize the emotional weight they now carry. They can copy strength. They can rewrite flesh, but they cannot optimize regret. They cannot improve sacrifice. Systems begin to overload, not from resistance, but from contradiction. On the Enterprise, alarms spike wildly. Captain, Data says, stunned. The Borg network is destabilizing. Not through attack, but through internal conflict. Picard stares at the readings. He's not fighting them, he's teaching them. Crusher whispers. Inside the cube, the collective fractures into dissonant voices. For the first time, drones hesitate, not awaiting command, but processing something new. Choice. Thor falls to one knee as the nanoprobes burn out, their programming collapsing under the weight of unquantifiable experience. The Borg scream not in pain, but in confusion. Perfection does not include uncertainty, and uncertainty has now been assimilated. The cube shudders, lights flickering across its vast interior as the collective struggles to reassert control. Thor looks up, exhausted but unbroken, knowing the moment will not last, because the Borg are learning again. And next time, they may decide that some lessons are too dangerous to allow. What if teaching an enemy to feel doesn't destroy them, but fractures the universe's most unstoppable force into something far more unpredictable? The Borg cube does not explode. That alone tells Picard something has gone terribly, fundamentally wrong. On the Enterprise bridge, silence replaces alarms as sensor readings twist into shapes no one has ever logged before. The cube drifts, its perfect geometry scarred by irregular power surges that ripple across its surface, like a dying heartbeat. Captain, Data says slowly, the collective is no longer unified. On the view screen, Borg drones stop moving in synchronized precision. Some turn their heads as if listening to voices no one else can hear. Others collapse where they stand. A few only a few tear at their own implants with frantic, clumsy hands. Individuality is bleeding through. Picard's voice is quiet. Thor. Inside the cube, Thor feels the weight of it all crash down at once. The nanoprobes have gone inert, but what they carried remains echoes of memory reverberating through the shattered collective. He can feel it now, not as godly awareness, but as a pressure in the air, like the aftermath of a storm that changed the shape of the land. The Borg are afraid, not of him, of themselves. You have corrupted perfection. The collective snarls, its voice no longer singular but fractured, layered with dissent. Thor pushes himself to his feet, every muscle screaming in protest. Perfection that cannot endure doubt is already broken. Around him, Drones twitch and convulse as incompatible processes clash. Subroutines designed for obedience collide with newly introduced variables, grief, hesitation, memory without utility. One drone steps forward. It removes its visor. "I remember," it says, voice shaking, human beneath the metal. "I had a name." The collective recoils violently, severing the drone's connection in an instant. The body collapses, lifeless. Thor's heart sinks. "You see," the collective hisses, "this weakness leads only to loss." Thor kneels beside the fallen drone. Loss is the price of being more than a machine. The cube lurches again, harder this time. Structural integrity warnings cascade through its systems as entire sections power down, no longer able to maintain coherence without absolute unity. On the Enterprise, Worf grips the console. The cube is tearing itself apart. "Yes," Data replies, "but not fatally." The collective is isolating compromised nodes. Picard's expression darkens. They're adapting. Again, inside the cube, the collective speaks with renewed cold clarity. The anomaly has been identified. Thor Odinson is a mimetic contaminant. He will be removed. Force fields snap into place around Thor. Cutting beams ignite, precise and merciless. The Borg have learned their lesson. They will not assimilate him again. They will erase him. Thor braces himself, exhaustion dragging at his limbs. He cannot summon thunder. He cannot overpower them. He has given everything he had to give. And yet the cube trembles as something unexpected happens. The compromised drones, those touched by doubt, begin to resist. Not efficiently, not strategically, but desperately. They disrupt systems, delay targeting sequences, reroute power away from the execution grid. Tiny acts, meaningless, alone, overwhelming together. "You cannot stop this." The collective snarls. Thor looks around at the Chaosat beings, discovering, in fragments, what it means to choose. "I don't have to," he says. "I already did." On the Enterprise, Data's eyes widen. Captain, localized Borg subsystems are refusing collective commands. This behavior is unprecedented. Picard leans forward. "Thor gave them a question." "Yes," Data says softly. "And questions do not assimilate easily." The execution beams falter. Thor feels the cube's structure destabilizing rapidly, now not collapsing inward, but unraveling outward, like a knot pulled loose from the inside. The collective makes a decision. The cube begins a transwarp ignition sequence. "They're going to flee," Riker says. With him still on board, Picard's voice sharpens. "Not if we can help it." Lock onto Thor's signal. Inside the cube, Thor feels the pull of transwarp fields building, violent, disorienting. If the cube escapes, it will carry its fracture across the galaxy, spreading confusion, resistance, and retaliation in equal measure. He may have saved this universe today, but doomed countless others tomorrow. Thor straightens, making his choice. He turns toward the heart of the cube, the central nexus of the collective, and begins to walk, each step heavy, deliberate. If he cannot destroy the Borg, he will become the boundary they cannot cross, and that choice may cost him everything he has left. What if the final victory isn't stopping the end, but redefining what an ending means? For a god, a machine, and an entire universe watching from the brink, Thor walks alone toward the heart of the Borg cube. The corridors warp subtly around him as transwarp energy builds, reality stretching thin like metal under too much heat. Drones fall away behind him, not chasing, not guiding, simply unable to follow. The closer he moves toward the central nexus, the quieter the cube becomes, as if the collective itself is holding its breath. This place is not a throne room, not a battlefield. It is a mind-made architecture, endless conduits of thought, memory, and command, converging into a vast, pulsating core of green light. The collective speaks again, its voice stripped of fury now, sharpened by resolve. "You are inefficient," it says. "You introduce instability. You must be erased." Thor stops at the edge of the nexus. Once, he would have laughed. Once, he would have raised his hammer and dared gods and monsters alike to challenge him. But that Thor died with Asgard. What stands here now is something quieter and far more dangerous. "You fear me," Thor says, not accusing, not triumphant, simply stating a fact. "We do not fear," the collective replies. Thor steps forward anyway. "Then why are you running?" The transwarp field surges. Outside, the Enterprise struggles to maintain a transporter lock as space-time fractures violently around the cube. "Captain," Data says urgently, "if the cube completes its jump, Mr. Thor will be lost beyond retrieval." Picard closes his eyes for a fraction of a second. Then, softly, he knows. Inside the Nexus, the collective reveals its final calculation. Holographic projections bloom around Thor probabilities, outcomes, simulations branching endlessly. In every scenario where Thor survives, the Borg fragment. In every scenario where the Borg remain whole, Thor does not. You are the variable, the collective influence. Your removal restores order. Thor studies the projections. He sees galaxies where Borg cubes hesitate, others where rebellion spreads like fire. Worlds not conquered but changed, unpredictable, dangerous, hopeful. He exhales slowly. So be it, he says. Thor steps into the core. The pain is immediate and absolute. Not his memories ignite as fuel. Thunder, laughter, loss, love, failure. Every choice he ever made burns through the collective's central processing like a storm of impossible data. Not information, meaning the Borg scream as one. Not in agony. In realization. They see now what perfection costs, what it excludes, what it erases. The certainty they worship cracks under the weight of a single, undeniable truth. Existence cannot be optimized without being diminished. The cube convulses, transwarp collapses inward. Power grids overload in cascading failure as the collective fractures beyond repair, severing itself into isolated shards to survive. Thor feels himself unraveling too. His body cannot contain this anymore. He is not a god, not here, not now. As the cube implodes, a single transporter beam finally pierces the chaos, locking onto Thor's fading signal. On the Enterprise, Picard grips the armrest. Energize, light tears Thor from the collapsing Nexus. He rematerializes on the transporter pad, collapsing to his knees as the Borg cube vanishes from sensors, not destroyed, but scattered, broken, forever changed. Silence fills the ship. Thor does not rise. Medical teams rush in, but Picard holds up a hand, stepping closer. Thor looks up at him, eyes dim, mortal, yet steady. It is done, Thor whispers. They will never be whole again. Picard kneels beside him. And you? Thor smiles faintly. I think. This universe has finished reshaping me. Days later, Thor stands on the observation deck, watching stars pass by no longer as realms to be guarded, but as places to be explored. He feels no thunder answering his heartbeat, no destiny pulling him forward, only choice. Picard joins him. Starfleet could learn much from you. Thor shakes his head. No, I learned from you. Gods look to the past for meaning. Your people look forward. Outside, the galaxy stretches in, vast, uncertain, alive. Ragnarok did not follow Thor into this universe. Instead, something else did. The idea that even endings can evolve, and that sometimes the greatest power a god can wield is knowing when to let go.